American continent, the New World, as it was named by the Europeans when they learned that these lands were not part of Asia, a place that from its, let's say, discovery by the Spanish crown, whatever your opinion is about the arrival of the empires of the old continent, changed the planet in such a drastic way that many kingdoms have to rethink their strategy of government and economy. Some came out very benefited in the beginning, but afterwards they fell under their own weight. Others almost did not participate in the first years, but ended up with the best parts. And having all this in mind, have you ever wondered how different would things have been if, physically, this continent was not a part of our world? Well, today we'll discuss a little about this subject. My name is Rafael Peraza and this is What If the Americas Had Never Existed? I know many will say this is literally impossible, a ridiculous idea because in the absence of this massive continent, Europe and the rest of the world would not be the same. The weather, the tectonic movements, everything different, and we know it. But the purpose of this video is just to entertain, to think about how different things would have been in another reality. So, in this alternate reality, the history of humanity is exactly the same as the real one. There was a Macedonian Empire, the Romans, the Persians, Chinese, England, Spain and other European kingdoms are still there. All the same until the year 1492, when after months and months of insisting, Christopher Columbus obtains from the King of Spain 3 caravels for the goal of demonstrating that it was possible to navigate from Europe to Asia. And although he was right, he wouldn't live to see it because, well, the distance was too long. They ran out of food and, well, let's just say that they died. The truth is that the non-existence of the Americas changed everything, absolutely everything. At the 15th century, Europe was not a factor of global change. Of course, there were very strong kingdoms, but their conflicts would be summarized in local problems, repelling attacks by Muslim nations and maybe push a bit to obtain territories and resources in North Africa and even the Middle East. Feudalism will be the most common form of government in Europe for much more time than in our current reality, making the plebeians to report to their feudal lords and this one to the king directly. That idea of wanting to control the whole world that the English, French and Spanish had at some point simply would not exist, as European colonialism was born with the discovery of the New World. Without this, the European nations will continue to fight among themselves to obtain resources and lands in and around the continent. Without the huge amount of treasures of the New World, the precious metals, the gems, the potatoes, the sugar, the tobacco, the rum, the fruits and much more other things, Europe will not have a good commercial advantage over the rest of the world. There wouldn't be a massive purchase of gold and silver to Spain by the Ottoman and Chinese empires. The trade routes between them will be much more uncongested, and in fact it will be Europe that will continue to pay more to bring the spices, porcelain and silks from the Middle East and Asia. Again, I have to stress, there will be bilateral trade between Europe and Asia, but it will not be a quarter as important as it was with the resources of the Americas. The European kingdoms will be extremely different. Spain, for example, the strongest kingdom by the 15th century, remains a powerful nation due to the Habsburg control that spread across the continent and gave the Spanish nobility control of southern Italy, parts of what we know today as Germany and other lands. In fact, most of the conflicts between kingdoms of the old continent will happen because the Habsburgs will concentrate more on Europe since they will not have the worries of a new world. As a matter of fact, it is a little ironic to think that the Spanish Empire might have been on the top of Europe for a longer time without the discovery of the Americas, since they wouldn't have a superinflation because of the excess of gold and silver from the mines in Peru, Bolivia, Mexico and other areas. Spain was an empire so vast that its fall was like a domino effect, watching over and trying to maintain control over so many colonies and lands. The control of some and losses of others made this nation fall hard, and it was very difficult to recover from. But in this alternative reality, maintaining a strong presence in their native continent without so much wealth to waste will make the Spanish crown think twice before making a decision that could cost them a lot. Another territory of which Spain would not have control over in this reality is the Philippines. These were conquered by Spain after expeditions sailed from New Spain, today's Mexico, and arrived and colonized this territory. But without a New Spain, it could not have been possible. In the absence of wars and competition from new lands and resources, conflicts would be maintained by beliefs and difference of thought. For example, one of the many wars that could happen between Europe would be because of the rise of Protestantism. I know that the ideas of this religion are born in a moment where we already had the knowledge of a new world, but this ideology had little to do with the actions that were carried out in America. England continues to help the Netherlands to separate from Spain, and many wars without apparent winner will occur between kingdoms that acclaim that their beliefs was the only one that should exist. And we could talk about all the details of this war, but we still have to talk about the repercussions in the rest of the world because of the non-existence of America. So I will leave in your imagination the development and the winners of these conflicts between Europeans. Without the existence of new lands that require a strong and resistant workforce to exploit fields or extract minerals, the business of the slavery of Africans would be an operation 1,000 times inferior to that we had in our current reality. Because of this, Africa would have a much reduced interaction with Europe. Still, there would be friction between both continents as empires such as Mali, Morocco, and other nations would often cut off Europeans to cross Africa and reach Asia. Nevertheless, Spain, Portugal, and France will build cities and ports around the African coast to establish commercial routes and maintain a presence in the area, but nothing that would put Europeans at a much higher advantage than the Africans. In fact, cities like Timbuktu will be hot spots in Africa because of their geopolitical position, their importance, and their academic influence, as they had libraries, universities, and public education centers, and even for their religion, which will also cause problems with Europe, as many African empires believe and practice Islam, causing attacks on European settlements and its allied kingdoms. People have always seen Africa as a weak continent, without government and disorganized, but this reality was the result of many internal problems: European colonization, the clash between pagan religions, Islam and Christianity, mass slavery, and racial differences brought from Europe. So in this reality, the African kingdoms would not be a superpower, yeah, but they would be able to sustain and stand for the test of time. They would be there for themselves. Hey, it is not for nothing that one of the richest men in history has been Mansa Musa, king of the Empire of Mali. Meanwhile, in Asia, China and Japan will be involved in their own problems. The overproduction of goods will not happen since there will not be enough of the resources of the Americas that the Europeans exported to the rest of the world. And because of this, China would not have created that obsession for silver supported by Spain that caused the Ming dynasty to succumb. Australia is more complicated. It would be very difficult for any European nation to conquer it because of how far it was from the rest of the world. So eventually some kingdom in the area, or maybe even Japan or China, will find it. And because of its large size, it might be like a mini America in our reality, but for Asians and maybe even for Arabs. But let's go back to Europe for a minute, because the truth is that things were not going very well there. The development of a nation comes either from periods of freedom and peace or from competition. Sadly for this continent, the only competition that there will be, it will come from war. The competition for land, the extraction of the resources, and the transformation of these into products of all kinds made people look for technological advances. For example, inventions such as the steam engine and the railways were given largely by the need to transport large quantities of raw materials and products between long distances. Without the excess of resources obtained by Europe from America, Africa, and Asia, the need to move many things would not have arisen so quickly. The Industrial Revolution would not have taken place either. You know, similar reasons. The truth is that many inventions and revolutions would not have happened, or at least it would have taken longer to happen in a world without the Americas. Not having an excess of production, inventing new ways to streamline process and mass production would not have been a priority. delaying the Industrial Revolution and preventing the mass migration of peasants to the cities. Moreover, without the American Revolution, it could not be demonstrated that the aristocracy could be defeated, and without that example, it is almost certain that there had not been a French Revolution. Without a French Revolution and without the United States, there would be no example of democracy and states, making the monarchies remain strong. If Napoleon had not become emperor and not conquered the Holy Roman Empire, avoiding the eventual creation of Germany, Austria would not have fallen and would remain a superpower. All this and much more would have certainly changed. Eventually, someone will prove that you can get to Asia from Europe, but this achievement will be purely for bragging rights, since the trip would have been so long and dangerous that it wouldn't have been profitable to use it as a trade route. The point is that the world would be a totally different place if the American continent had not existed. Everything we talked about previously is not more than a brief look at what could have been. Surely I left many things out, and even I know I could be wrong in one thing or another. But remember, the idea of these videos is simply to entertain. If you like this type of videos in particular, subscribe now. I will talk about alternative realities, history, the future of technology, and many other things. If you have already subscribed and you want to help the channel grow, you could also help me on Patreon. Remember to hit the like button, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.